Well, and one of the things that's tricky too, and this is a bit different in the venture space, but essentially what's really, really important is due diligence at a point where you have something to do due diligence on. In the beginning, it's proving your proof of concept, proving Alessandro's background, and using your entrepreneurial spirit to sell them the dream. That's probably where your talents really shine through, is you believe in it so passionately as an entrepreneur. But you'll get a lot of guys who, in the beginning in a venture round, who will be very tech focused, where they can't sell it. They can't really put that vision in their head into reality. They just know the technical nuance behind it, and it becomes very difficult. That's why you see a lot of CEOs are more creative. They're not as creative. They're not technical. They're more salesy, more conversational, more networking focused. Mm-hmm. It's not because there isn't value to the strategy. It's because at the high level, it's selling the strategy to somebody else, whether that makes sense or not.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So, Alessandro, one of my questions I think I ask a lot of entrepreneurs that come on the show, and I think might be interesting for you, is we started the podcast, for example, during the recessionary economy. We get and most of my businesses were started during a recession at some point in time. I know that there's both positives and negatives to doing it, but I also know that in everybody's journey, there's always this point where you feel like the odds have been difficultly stacked against you. Have you had that point yet? Do you feel like there was a point where you were like, okay, is this the right traction for the company?
I mean, it's hard. We've definitely made some pivots. I mentioned that, we're very specific now, like put your home in a trust, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't start out that way. And I actually got my butt kicked by our largest investor. He's, the richest person I know by far. He's richer than Bill Ackman. Mm-hmm. And so this guy, he flew out on his private jet and like told me to meet him at the airport. And, we weren't getting good traction. This was like 5 months ago, 6 months ago, because I was in the middle of fundraising and I wasn't getting any lead investors. This was right at that point where, we started getting traction, right before we started getting that traction. And so this investor, he's super successful. He's invested in a ton of companies in the past, and a ton of very successful companies. And so he was like, he said, the best companies in the world can describe what they do in a very simple sentence. Mm-hmm. It's very clear what they do. He said, they do this for these people specifically. So like they do this very specifically for this group of people. And he's like, what's your sentence? You guys don't have anything. You're all over the place. And at the time I was partnering with Carta, going after startup shareholders. I was working on small business owners. We were trying to become a licensed trust company. I was partnering with RIAs. He's like, you're all over the place. You're never going to do it. You're boiling the ocean. You're going to get nothing accomplished. And he's like, the way we were partnering with RIAs, and that's how we were going to monetize. We were going to get split revenue with registered investment advisors. And he was like, what are you going to do? You're going to build a nice RIA? And he's like, you're never going to build a monopoly if you do that. And, he says, the way you build a monopoly is you find the widest base of mass market customers that have a single problem for you to solve.
Fantastic advice.
And he was very specific. And, at first he was like, I don't know what the answer is, but you need to figure that out. But then like a couple minutes later, he's like, you know what? I know what the answer is. You need to help homeowners. He's like, you need to help homeowners put their home in a trust. And, I started doing some research right away. I'm like, I already knew that the deed process was a nightmare, but it clicked because it was like, there are 80 million homeowners in the United States. 95% of homes are in trust. It's a very specific problem. It's a really wide group of customers. And so literally we rebranded our website like the following week. And it's like the easiest way to put your home in a trust. And we just from like changing the tagline on our website, like we started speeding up just from that alone. And so I think customers had a lot, less confusion. They're like, oh, what do I do with it? I put my home in it. That's what I do. But then that started informing our product and what we were, our product updates, and it started informing my partnership strategies. And so like literally getting focused created the traction that allowed us to close our financing round within like 30 days after we made that switch. But before that, we were really we weren't going to go out of business, but we were just spinning our wheels. And, we were like, how are we going to compete with these competitors that have raised way more money than we have. And they're blowing their money on television commercials and all types of Facebook ads. And we're like, we can't do that. We can't compete with them. And if it comes to losing money, they're going to lose way more than we are. So we have to get smarter. We have to get more focused. And this strategy really allowed us to do that. And it's allowed us to get significant traction in a short period of time.
It's overwhelming, isn't it? When you have, as somebody who runs a company, it can become so difficult to juggle all the things you have to do.
Right.
You got to have a website. You got to have clients coming in. You got to have customer service. You got to make sure that the product's being executed. Then you got to raise capital. Then you got to talk to your accountants. You got to have the finance in mind. You're running the business, so you have to understand that at the end of the day, what that business shows on a monthly and a quarterly basis as far as profits and expenses, that matters. You got to manage those throughout the quarter, throughout the year.
Right.
Saied, what were you going to say?
Yeah, so to your point earlier, you mentioned that, those who actually do have a trust actually put their home inside the trust. I mean, as an underwriter, especially in the commercial real estate space that we're in, our first source of repayment has always been the property, right? The cash flow of the property. The second is always the equity of the property. And then the third is the sponsor, the individual themselves, right? I know obviously in California, we know we're a single action state, but besides the point, you still want to make sure you grab as much as you can. A lot of times what we'll see or I'll see is, and not to say that it's intentional, but sometimes when borrowers are submitting their applications, they'll fill it out and they'll say that they'll forget to leave off that they actually have a trust.
Yeah.
And the first thing I do every time I see that, I always go and I check the house title. Sure enough, it's held in a trust.
Yeah.
And I go, I'm going to go ahead and need that trust too, boss.
Well, that's also, yeah. He does do that. That's the way he talks.
That's exactly how I say it to him too.
But, and that's true. But it also kind of highlights one of the benefits of what Get Dynasty is able to do to you. Because you're paying a subscription service, there's a built-in reminder to look at it and be familiar with it on an annual basis. And I know it's going to sound weird. Even at $100, if you're paying $100 every year, you're going to go, oh my God, light bulb moment, trust, let's look at it. I'm paying for this service. Let's get it updated. What did I buy? And in a perfect world, everybody's financial position should be improving every single year. Some kind of, even incrementally, right? And sometimes that's reflected. But there's also, as you get older, and you don't have to be 100 years old for this to happen. In my 30s, I started losing friends. People around me their lives started changing. Those things all impact your trust.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you can see, I mean, even like as you get married and you have kids, I mean, these are things that constantly need to get updated, right?
Yeah, the kids part's huge. And we all have kids here. I'm sure family's all big to all of us. I'm sure you know that. But so walk me through this then. So you have this aha moment. This investor flies out. He says, okay, here's the structure. Were you as an entrepreneur open to that feedback? Or at the time, did you have to think about it right away when you knew this is it, like the moment was there?
It clicked for me immediately. And, we have a lot of investors. They give me all types of advice. And, I want to be respectful and acknowledge their advice. But like 99% of the time, like we're not taking their advice. I'll take it back to the team. And my partners are a real pain in the ass sometimes. They disagree with everything that I bring.
Mine are too.
My partner too. Yeah, my partner. Yeah, both of my partners.
And so that to me was like, I was sold right away when I heard this. It just like made so much sense to me. And so the next thing I had to do was I had to go back and get my partners on board with it. And they didn't get on board right away, but like once we rebranded our website, like they saw the traction, they couldn't deny it.
What was the initial
so
pushback?
They're all.
What was the original part? What was your partner's initial concern on the pushback? What was if you can share anyway? Were they hesitant to just change the direction, or were they concerned about how that would change the company?
Yeah, I think they were worried about like, if we just change it, we're going to get less customers and pivoting all. And me, I'm kind of a crazy sales guy. I always have ideas, right? And so like this idea is for this week, and then next week is another idea. Next week is another. And these guys are like, they're building the product, right? Like they're the team building everything. I'm just coming up with a lot of the ideas, and they're always getting frustrated because I make them build something, and then I'm like, scrap it. We're going to do something else. And so I think they just like were tired of the whiplash, and they weren't sold that, it was the right move for us. And so I think nowadays what we do, instead of like arguing, my idea is better, your idea is, it's like, let's try it and let's look at the data, and the data will decide if we continue doing it or not. We're early enough right now where we can change our tagline on our website pretty easily, and it's not going to have a material impact one way or another. We'll see what happens right away. And so that, we did it. We looked at the data. The data was strong, supporting that this was the right decision. And like, we've been pulled that direction. And so we try to get away from, who's got the better idea at this point. And it's just like, let's test as much as we can and look at the actual